At my family's Christmas dinner, my place setting had the black sheep on it. My aunt snickered, "At least you're honest." I smiled, stood up, and said, "Here's to the last family meal I'll ever attend." They thought I was joking until I walked out and left them with one final surprise. Hi Reddit. I'm Jonah, 34M, and I didn't think I'd ever post about my family. Mostly because for a long time, I blamed myself for how they treated me. Thought maybe I was too sensitive, too different, too much. But something happened last Christmas that finally made me stop making excuses for them. And now, looking back, I honestly can't believe how long I tolerated it. To understand the dinner, I've got to go back a little. My family's always been complicated. On paper, we're the kind of people who send out holiday cards and coordinating outfits, host charity drives, post pictures of brunch like it's a sacred ritual. But behind all that, there's this nasty undercurrent, favoritism, passive aggressiveness, control. And most of it revolves around my mom's side, especially her sister, Aunt Lorna. Lorna is the type of person who can insult you while sounding like she's complimenting you. "You've really embraced your look, Jonah. So brave to go against the grain like that." Or, "I admire how you're not obsessed with money like the rest of us." Stuff like that. I used to brush it off. But over the years, it wore me down. I'm the middle child of three, but you'd never know it. My older sister, Claire, can do no wrong. Married to a dentist, 2 kids, SUV, PDA president. My younger brother, Joel, started his own business at 23, drives a Tesla, and goes to dad for golfing weekends. Me? I work in set design for theater productions and freelance art direction. Not flashy, but it pays well and I love it. I rent a place in the city and keep to myself. That's apparently enough to make me the mysterious one, code for disappointment. This Christmas was the first time I agreed to come home in 3 years. I'd skipped the last few holidays after a particularly ugly Thanksgiving where Joel joked that I was probably on food stamps and my mom laughed. Not just a chuckle, like, laughed hard. I left early and didn't speak to anyone for months after. But this year, my dad called me in early December and asked me, really asked, to come. He said he missed me, that things were different, that mom had been reflecting. That word made me laugh at the time. Reflecting? Mom? She can't even reflect sunlight off a mirror without making it about herself. But part of me wanted to believe it. Dad isn't usually the peacemaker, so for him to reach out meant something. I told him I'd think about it. 2 days later, a handwritten card showed up in my mailbox. It was from my mom. Just a short note. "Jonah, we'd love to have you with us this Christmas. It would mean a lot to your father. Love, Mom." No apology, of course. No mention of what happened. But still, I could practically hear her forcing the pen across the paper. So yeah, I said yes. I arrived on Christmas Eve, suitcase in hand, greeted by Claire at the door like she was hosting a red carpet event. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt like I was being scanned. "You look artistic." I didn't even ask what that meant. I knew better. Just smiled and walked inside. My parents' house hadn't changed in the 3 years I'd been gone. Same nutcracker collection. Same fireplace garland. Same photo wall with Joel front and center. I half expected a portrait of him with a halo over his head. Mom greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and a tight smile. "I'm glad you came," she said, then added, "You didn't have to dress up for us." I was wearing dark jeans and a blazer. Nothing crazy. Dinner that night was awkward but manageable. I stayed mostly quiet, let them have their chatter about Joel's new condo and Claire's daughter getting into gymnastics. No one asked about my work. That wasn't new. The real moment came the next evening, Christmas dinner. My mom always makes a big deal out of setting the table. She has personalized placeholders for each guest, little folded cards with our names written in cursive. She's been doing it since we were kids. When I walked into the dining room, I glanced down the table, scanning for my name. And then I saw it. Not Jonah. Not even a joke nickname. Just 2 words, carefully written in metallic ink on folded cardstock. The black sheep. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. A bad joke. But when I looked up, Aunt Lorna was already watching me, lips twitching with amusement. "At least you're honest," she said, sipping from her glass like it was the most normal thing in the world. Something in me snapped a little. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a click, like a lock sliding into place. I smiled. I pulled out my chair. I stood there for a second, and then I said, calm as can be, "Here's to the last family meal I'll ever attend." There was this half-second of confused laughter. Claire went, "Oh, come on, don't be so sensitive." Joel smirked. Mom said my name sharply, like she was trying to pull me back in line. But I didn't sit down. I reached into my jacket pocket. And that's where things really started to shift. I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the smooth envelope I had tucked in there that morning. It was plain white, nothing fancy, but heavy, thicker than a card. I could feel every set of eyes on me as I pulled it out and held it between my fingers. "You always have to make it about you," my mother said. Her voice was sharper now, the smile gone. "It was a joke. You used to laugh at jokes." "No," I said, finally looking at her. "I used to pretend they didn't hurt." That silenced the room for a second. Claire shifted in her seat and gave a low sigh, like I was the one ruining everything. Joel leaned back in his chair and smirked in that way he always did when he was enjoying someone else getting humiliated. "You're being dramatic," he said, not even looking at me. "It's just a name card. You're the one who's always saying you could have heard a fork drop." My mom's eyes darted from my hand to my face like she wasn't sure what I was about to do. Joel leaned back in his chair, like he was preparing for a performance. Claire looked amused, almost smug, probably expecting me to fumble and apologize like I always did. And Aunt Lorna? She had that same little smirk, like she'd already decided I'd be the punchline of tonight's story. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I just pulled out a folded envelope, sealed in red, and placed it gently in the center of my plate. "What's that?" Dad asked, his voice the first to break the silence. I looked at him for a long moment before I answered. "Something I've been meaning to share, but I thought tonight felt right." Claire snorted. "You brought us homework?" I didn't respond to that. I just slid the envelope slightly forward with one finger. "It's not for all of you," I said, keeping my voice even. "Just for Mom and Dad. And I'm leaving it here because after this, I won't be coming back." The laughter died instantly. Even Lorna sat up a little straighter. "What do you mean, not coming back?" Mom asked, her tone shifting, still sharp, but now edged with something else. "Worry? Embarrassment?" "I meant what I said," I replied. "This is the last dinner. The last holiday. I gave it one more shot, just like you asked me to." I looked at Dad when I said that, and he dropped his gaze. "But I'm done trying to earn a place that never existed." "Don't be ridiculous," Claire said. "This is just who we are. You've always been the emotional one, Jonah." "I used to think that was a flaw," I said, turning to her. "Now I know it's what kept me human in a house that runs on shame and performance." "What's your tone?" Mom snapped. "This is Christmas." I nodded slowly. "Exactly." Aunt Lorna rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. No one's ever stopped you from being yourself, Jonah. You're just mad that no one claps every time you do it." I actually laughed at that. Not because it was funny, but because it was such a perfect example of how far off the mark they all were. "This isn't about clapping," I said. "It's about respect. Basic decency. You all act like you're this picture-perfect family, but you've been digging at me since I was old enough to speak differently, dress differently, think differently. And every time I pushed back, it was either, he's too sensitive, or he's just going through a phase. I'm 34. It's not a phase. It's me. And I'm tired of apologizing for that." Joel let out a low whistle. "So what? This is your dramatic exit? You want us all to cry and beg you to stay?" "No," I said, calmer than I felt. "I want nothing from any of you. That envelope? It's just some paperwork. You can open it after I leave. Or not. That's up to you." Mom stood up now, face red, hands stiff at her sides. "If you walk out of here, Jonah, don't expect to come crawling back." I met her eyes. "I won't." And with that, I walked to the entryway, picked up my coat from the rack, and put it on slowly, methodically. No one followed me. No one tried to stop me. But as I reached for the front door, I heard Dad say something under his breath. I paused, hand still on the doorknob. I turned my head just slightly. What was that? He looked up at me, and for a second, I saw something flicker in his face. Regret, maybe, or guilt. You really think we're that bad? He asked quietly. I let the question hang in the air for a moment. Then I replied, no, I think you're worse than you're willing to admit. And with that, I opened the door and stepped outside into the freezing night. The cold hit me like a wall when I stepped outside, but I barely felt it. My heart was pounding too hard, my mind buzzing. I didn't look back, not even when the door shut behind me, not even when I heard voices rising inside, confused and irritated. I walked to my car, turned the key, and sat there for a minute, staring at the house through the windshield. That house had seen so many versions of me, quiet, apologetic, eager to please. They thought tonight was a tantrum, a dramatic flare-up that would fizzle out, just like all the others. They had no idea this time was different. Let me tell you about that envelope. A few months earlier, I got an email out of the blue from a woman named Harriet. She was the attorney handling the estate of my late great-uncle Aldrich, someone I barely knew. He was my grandmother's brother, lived up north, kept to himself. I met him only once as a kid, when he visited for a week and took me to an art museum while everyone else went to a football game. I remembered liking him. He asked me real questions, listened when I answered. Harriet told me that Uncle Aldrich had passed away the previous year, and after a long probate process, the details of his will were being finalized. She said he'd left something to me. Only me. I thought it would be something symbolic, a sketchbook, maybe, or a letter. Something personal. But when I sat down across from Harriet in her office and she slid the documents toward me, I almost laughed. He'd left me everything. Not just some savings. Not just a car or a cabin or a collection. Everything. Property. A small but well-performing investment portfolio. Rights to several historical illustrations he'd sold back in the 70s that were still earning royalties. He'd been quiet about his success, but he had built a small legacy and decided it should go to me. The only condition was that I not tell the rest of the family until the estate had been fully transferred. He even wrote, in his own handwriting, "Let them see who you are without explaining it to them." I'd cried in my car after that meeting. Not because of the money, but because it was the first time I felt like someone in my family saw me. And I kept it quiet. All of it. Until Christmas. Inside that envelope on the table, beneath my place card labeled "The Black Sheep," were copies of the finalized documents. A letter from Harriet confirming the transfer. And a second letter written by me, with as much composure and clarity as I could manage. In that letter, I explained how much Uncle Aldrich had left me. I laid it all out modestly, but clearly, not to flaunt it, to draw a line. I wrote about how I wouldn't be sharing a cent, not because I was vengeful, but because for years I had been treated like an afterthought, like a failure, a joke. I wrote that this wasn't revenge. This was a boundary. And then I thanked them sincerely, because without their coldness, their subtle cruelty, their constant efforts to shrink me, I might never have found the strength to stand apart, to build a life they couldn't touch. I ended it by saying they were free to continue their traditions, their gossip, their carefully curated family image. I wouldn't interfere. I simply wouldn't be participating anymore. And then I added one more line, just for Aunt Lorna. I never needed applause, just silence. And now, I finally have it. I drove away that night feeling lighter than I had in years. But I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because if there's one thing my family hates more than being called out, it's being outdone. I didn't hear from them for 2 days. And then the calls started. First it was my mom, then Claire, then Joel. When I didn't pick up, they started emailing, then texting. Then Dad left a voicemail, his voice low and tight, saying we needed to talk privately about the situation. That's when I knew they'd opened the envelope. And they weren't angry that I left. They were furious that I'd won. By the third day, my inbox was overflowing. Claire sent a string of messages, each one longer and more frantic than the last. She started out pretending to be concerned. "Jonah, we were all just caught off guard. Okay? Can we please talk about this like adults? But it didn't take long for her real tone to come through. You blindsided the whole family. That money was meant to help all of us. You know how much Joel and I have struggled with the kids. Do you really think Uncle Aldrich would have wanted it all wasted on your solo artist lifestyle? I read that one twice. Then I read it again, more slowly, letting each sentence settle like dust in a room I hadn't cleaned out in years. Joel's message was shorter, but just as pointed. Real classy, Jonah. You always had a way of making everything about you. Just remember, karma doesn't take bribes. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because for once, the silence wasn't mine to endure, it was theirs. But the one that really got to me was from my mom. It came as a voice memo. I hesitated before playing it, thumb hovering over the play button, pulse picking up like I was 12 again and about to be told I'd disappointed her again. Her voice started off calm. Almost too calm. Jonah, I hope you're proud of yourself. You made Christmas about you, ruined the entire evening, and humiliated this family. That letter? That money? It's just numbers on paper. What you've really done is put yourself above the people who raised you, who tried to help you, even when you pushed us away. You think Aldrich gave you that inheritance because you're special? He barely knew you. And if he'd seen how you treat family, he would have thought twice. I replayed that part again. If he'd seen how you treat family. It was rich, coming from the woman who once told me I was too weird to raise properly, and then laughed like it was some kind of clever observation. Still, her words didn't shake me the way they used to. They made me feel something else now, clarity. I finally understood something I hadn't dared admit before. My family wasn't just indifferent. They were threatened. I wasn't supposed to grow up with self-respect. I was supposed to stay quiet, play my part, nod politely when Joel mocked my job or Claire said something condescending in front of her friends. I was supposed to keep showing up, proving my worth, hoping one day they'd finally say, hey, maybe we were wrong about you. But now I'd stopped playing, and I had something they couldn't ignore. It wasn't the money. Not really. It was the fact that I'd chosen to walk away before they could push me out. And they couldn't stand that. On the fourth day, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Just a shoebox-sized parcel with my name in handwriting I recognized immediately, my dad's. I debated opening it. Part of me thought it might be some olive branch. A letter. A photo album. Even a peace offering. I opened it. Inside was a copy of a family photo from Christmas 5 years ago. The whole extended family gathered around the fireplace, wearing those ridiculous matching scarves Aunt Lorna used to buy in bulk. Everyone was smiling. Everyone but me. I was sitting off to the side, hands in my lap, looking somewhere just outside the frame. Taped to the photo was a note. Just one line, written in my dad's familiar blocky script. You walked out of this. Don't come crawling back in. And below that, a second note, clearly added by someone else. The handwriting was sharper. Claire's. P.S. Aldrich never even liked kids. I sat with that box for a long time. No anger. No tears. Just a slow, settling feeling in my chest, like a foundation being poured. They were doubling down. They weren't just upset I left. They were going to punish me for it. Which meant it was my turn. Not out of spite. Not out of pettiness. Out of necessity. Because the truth is, I'd spent most of my life trying not to become like them. But maybe, just for a little while, I could let myself outsmart them. And that's when the idea for what came next started to take shape. Something quiet, simple, and completely untraceable back to me. It started with a list. Not a dramatic one. Not even handwritten. Just a simple document I kept on my computer titled, Things They Forgot. I started with little things. The time Joel borrowed money from our grandmother's savings account without telling anyone and blamed it on a clerical error. The time Claire publicly mocked my art exhibit on social media while pretending to be proud in person. The time my mom let Lorna shred a sketchbook I'd left on the kitchen table because it looked creepy. And when I confronted her, she told me I should be grateful anyone even noticed it. I wrote it all down, and then I added to it. Conversations, snapshots, links, every petty dig disguised as concern, every birthday dinner where they forgot I was allergic to strawberries, Every joke made at my expense that turned into a lecture when I didn't laugh. But I wasn't doing this to dwell. I was doing it to remember, clearly, without the usual fog of guilt that followed me around like a shadow after every family interaction. I took time to breathe, to let go of the habit of explaining myself. I dove into work, commission projects, mentoring young artists, setting up a small community fund in Uncle Aldrich's name to help kids who grew up in environments like mine. Quiet, purpose-driven things. Meanwhile, my family spiraled. Joel started posting vague rants about certain people abandoning their blood. Claire's husband, who had never spoken more than 5 words to me, sent me an email full of passive advice about letting go of grudges before they rot you from the inside. They didn't understand what was happening. They thought this was about an inheritance. They didn't realize the inheritance was just a match. I was the one who'd built the fire. That's when I remembered something Harriet, the estate lawyer, mentioned during our final meeting. Uncle Aldrich had been sitting on the board of a private historical foundation in the city, quietly, as he did most things. He had a hand in choosing rotating exhibits for several smaller galleries, and had even anonymously funded a few of my earlier showcases. After his passing, his seat opened, and the board had offered it to me. At the time, I had declined. I wasn't sure I wanted to step into anything that felt too formal, too connected to the family's perception of legacy. But now, I saw the opportunity for what it really was: control. So I accepted, quietly, signed the paperwork, started attending meetings, not for recognition, but because I knew exactly how to use this platform. See, Claire had been lobbying for a feature at one of the galleries connected to the foundation, a photography showcase about modern motherhood that she hoped would catapult her local influencer brand into something bigger. Joel, meanwhile, had been courting donors for his wellness retreat that was little more than a glorified vacation rental with scented candles and vague promises of inner peace. They had no idea I was involved in either decision, and I didn't sabotage them. I simply did what they'd never done for me. I told the truth. I submitted a quiet, formal note to the board regarding potential applicants. I listed credentials, community involvement, and clarity of mission. Neither of them had any. Claire's proposal was rejected. Joel's donor pitch was gently declined. They were told the foundation was focusing on long-term sustainability and integrity in projects, not brand leverage. And when word got around that I was now part of that process, the silence was delicious. I didn't gloat. I didn't brag. I just lived. I renovated the cottage Uncle Aldrich left me, painted the walls with warm colors, filled the shelves with books and art supplies, hosted quiet little gatherings with friends who had become more of a family than the one I was born into. People who didn't roll their eyes when I spoke, or ask why I still wasn't married, or tell me to tone it down. Months passed. Then, one afternoon in June, a card arrived. It was handwritten in blue ink. The return address was Claire's. Inside was a folded note that read, "Mom's not well. She won't say it, but she misses you. We all do. Please come by. Let's talk." For a moment, I stared at it, feeling the tug of a very old reflex. The part of me that always ran when they called. The part that whispered maybe this time will be different. But then I remembered. I remembered the shoebox, the photo, the messages, the years. I folded the card neatly, placed it in a drawer, and stood in the center of my sunlit kitchen for a while, just breathing. Then I went back to work. I never sent a reply, because I didn't need to make a scene to have peace. I just had to stop letting them write the ending. And I had. Right now, I'm in a much better place, both literally and emotionally. I live in the cottage Uncle Aldrich left me, a quiet place tucked just outside the city. It's small but filled with things I love. Canvases leaned against the walls, books stacked in cozy corners, plants I used to think I'd never be able to keep alive. It's peaceful here. There's no tension in the air, no low-level dread creeping in before a family gathering. I still work as an illustrator, mostly freelance, and I've recently taken on a part-time mentorship role for a local youth art program. something I never thought I'd have the energy or clarity to do. The community fund I started in Aldrich's name is growing, and we've already helped a handful of underrepresented artists get their first gallery showings. As for my family, I haven't seen them since that Christmas dinner. They've tried a few more times to reach out, mostly vague emails or occasional cards around holidays, but I've stayed firm. Not angry, not spiteful, just done. I no longer feel the need to explain myself or wait for an apology that may never come. They can keep telling whatever version of the story they want at family parties. I have mine, and more importantly, I have peace.